Hello, hello. Oh, hi, Dan. I'm glad to see you. Hello, Cole. Lovely to have you here today. We're so excited to get started. We're going to give it a couple of minutes. Oh, well, you're in Chicago. I'm in Jamaica. We're going to have an international show here today. All right, we've got some more folks coming in. Yeah, Jamaica has been good. I will say, though, it is very warm, very, very warm. So I'm wearing my sunglasses to, protect you from the glare of my sweating cheeks. So oh, I'm here for the week. One of my best friends is from here, so I came to visit her family, and yeah, it's been really nice to be able to work here for a couple of days too. Really, really interesting. I really like this work from home thing. Okay, so for those who are just joining, I don't know if this is your first time being in an event on Venue. You can click on your initials in the top right corner, add a photo, add your LinkedIn information. There's a chat on the right hand side where we're able to bring engagement in. There's GIFs, there's emoji responses to messages, and then you'll also see a vertical bar of some emojis that you can click on throughout the event, and I'll show you some here. And you'll see that you can react to certain topics or things throughout the entire event, and we'll be excited to have some of that kind of engagement. So thank you so much for joining so far. I'm sure we'll have a couple more folks join us as we continue. We're very excited. Oh, hi, Samartha. I know we talked last week. It's nice to see you. Okay. So I know, yeah, it's almost, I guess it's 12:05 for you guys, but I am in an hour behind you. But we might as well get started. So let's go ahead. Yeah, thank you for turning off the music. Okay, so thank you everyone who has joined so far. Going to have an intimate event here today. Please let us know in the chat where you're calling in from. I'm glad to see Dan is in Chicago. We can't wait to have him back into Toronto for one of our events soon, but thanks for joining today. As I mentioned, you can update your profile in the top right if you want to. Totally up to you. But we're really excited. This is the second HustleStruggz we're having, and it is an insider-specific event that's all about talking about, how to navigate challenges or common themes of being an early entrepreneur. And so last month we talked about making first hires on a core team. And this month we're talking about how to evaluate different kinds of seed sources and things to consider along that journey. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed. I think I might have already repeated myself a little bit, but it's a fireside forum for sharing perspectives about navigating the challenges of early entrepreneurship. Oh, you're in Kingston, Ontario, Cole. That's so funny. I'll be in Kingston, Jamaica tomorrow, actually. So that's hilarious. And yes, as if you didn't hear me before, I'm in Jamaica this week. I was lucky to be invited down to visit a friend's family, and so I'm staying locally in Ocho Rios right now, and I'll be back in Toronto next week. Okay, so I'm going to now introduce the insider who's joining me on stage today. Really, really excited to have him. He's a recently signed up insider, and I know that he's going to have a lot of really wonderful insight to share. So I will do my best to pronounce his name. His name is Vivek Chandra. I'm sure that I didn't get it perfect, but I didn't get it too bad. And he is the president of Univentures Consulting and advises startups to realize the full potential of their ideas by bringing the science of entrepreneurship and real life experience to crack the code for success. He's supporting entrepreneurs engaged in disruptive payments and loyalty initiatives to remove customer pain points at various accelerators, such as Mars, Venture Labs, and Holt. He also works directly one-on-one with entrepreneurs as well. He advises startups across other industry verticals, leveraging things like artificial intelligence and blockchain technologies as well. He assists in finalizing startup product market fit and funding strategies, and he also supports growth strategies and enterprise business development approaches. He has an extensive Canadian and international banking network, which he leverages for support and exchanging ideas. As a successful bank executive, Vivek brings leadership experience in digital transformation, structural cost reduction, data-driven profitability and growth, customer segmentation, and risk management. As a VC fund LP and an active member of the GTA startup community, he has deep insights into the Canadian landscape. He has international learnings on use cases from work experiences in developing markets like Thailand, India, and the UAE. He completed his MBA from IIM Ahmedabad in India, and he has a bachelor's in technology from IIT Kanpur, India. So thank you so much for joining us today, Vivek. Let's bring you up to the stage and start chatting.
Hi, Laura, and indeed a pleasure to be here with the insiders of TechTO, all from the GTA, or hopefully all the Canadian tech founders who are on the forum.
Absolutely, yeah. It looks like we've got Kingston, Ontario represented, which I'm quite fond of. I went to university there. We've got someone calling in from Chicago, and I have a good feeling that a couple of others are in Toronto. I think that's where Samarth is. But yeah, so let's dive right in. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became interested in consulting with early stage startups?
Yeah, after thanks for sharing the brief background in terms of where I've been, and I'll talk a little bit more about where I'm trying to go now. But very briefly, in terms of where I've been, is that after my engineering and my MBA, I was running all kinds of different functions in banks and increasingly, more senior and executive roles. But as I spent more and more time working in big enterprise, uh, the engineering world around me started to change, and I realized how much more technology could do than it did when I started off my engineering career. So I was on the business side of things, I was on the product management, risk management, and using technology as an enabler when I was working in banking. And I saw these massive strides which are happening in the world on the way computing is being done, the way AI was coming in, the way cloud was happening. And I clearly saw that there's a whole bunch of industry who's lagging, and there's so much more opportunity for processes to be improved, for things to be done better, and more customer needs to be met, which weren't happening right now. And where a two-person team could start writing AI algorithms and do things in a better fashion. So that really piqued my interest. And I came to the conclusion that there's so much more excitement for me personally and so much better for the world by being able to fully leverage technology, which we have plenty of people around the table who are doing in solving real life problems. And I thought I brought that unique perspective on reality of the real life problems, and then educated myself on working with some of the challenges they face so that I can make a great synergy and help them in their journey forward.
And it's so true. These days there is a tech industry, but it feels like almost every company in the world needs to become a tech company in some way at this point in order to progress. And so I think it's wonderful that you've taken that industry expertise and now are applying it to help consult with startups that are starting to do their own thing and bring their own products forward. So on that topic, what kind of companies is your are your main focus area for your consultation?
I think what I've realized is that my core competencies in companies is really on pre-Series A. So most of the companies I initially started off working were only in AI and fintech, and all of them were tech companies. So that's the area I focus on, not so much things like healthcare or biomed or certain other things. So it's been tech companies by and large, which I'm focused on, and it's companies for smaller companies up to Series A, while the initial focus was fintech and AI. What I realized is that a lot of the areas I was covering off were pretty common, irrespective of the industry the person was in. So I would say that over the last 4 years, I've talked to probably 500 to 1,000 companies at varying levels of detail, and I've now figured that there are areas I can assist companies in virtually any technology area, provided they are in this area. Once they cross a certain threshold, and I'm just using these as broad indicators, that a Series A company has got a certain scale, a certain way of operating, probably 100 people, they're deep into a very specific area. And there I can help a fintech company, but I don't have enough domain expertise to be able to help them on really moving forward as rapidly. So that's what I've kept as
Right.
core focus.
Right. So it's like, you can help with the active entrepreneurship, but at a certain point in time, product market fit may be something that that they need to find a second opinion for, which will kind of lead to one of our questions that I'm going to ask later. So just to kind of open up, we're talking about how to evaluate seed sources, as an early stage entrepreneur. So in your opinion, at what point do you think a new founder should start shopping around for seed funding?
What I would say for a company is that what I will share with you initially is what will be the path for most entrepreneurs. And I'll qualify what I mean by most entrepreneurs and what are exceptions later. But for most entrepreneurs, for them to start getting into a reckoning for a seed finance, the first thing is they should have a team. So it's almost necessary that they have a couple of people, they have tech, they have business, they have some people who may be all rounders. So having a team is obviously extremely important. Having an initial business model which says that here's, basically identifying a problem, identifying a solution, that's critical. Uh, in the Canadian landscape, I would say very strongly that having an MVP and having some market validation being defined as either initial interest from companies, defined as early stage revenues, or early stage feedback, or government grants which show that there is method to your madness, are certainly helpful. So that bit of traction, I would say, is in the more so in the Canadian landscape, is extremely important for people to see you as being seed funding ready. Um,
So to summarize that, it's kind of, have a couple of people that align with your vision and what it is you're trying to do, that core team almost. Then also, know what the problem is that you're solving and what the challenges are that you're trying to address. And then, have some proof of the concept and of the, what it is that you're trying to bring to market and how you hope to bring it to market with a bit of a business model.
That's correct, and I'd throw the word MVP liberally into everything you said, because I've also talked to lots of entrepreneurs who believe that it'll take them 6 months to create a product for their customers, and we'll probably get into it later. That even at
Hmm.
that stage, having an MVP or having a PowerPoint which talks of the offering and being able to run it past some of the key customers is critical. So MVP can mean lots of different things, and we can certainly talk about it later. But that level of
Right, right.
validation is absolutely critical for, at least in the Canadian landscape, for people to be able to get seed funding. The only exception I
Okay.
would say to this whole thing is one is based on the entrepreneur type. So people who have had a very successful record in terms of raising money, selling companies, so on and so forth, who have shown that they can take an initial idea and rapidly bring it up to a scalable business, and they have that germ of an idea. For them, this rule doesn't apply. So I've seen entrepreneurs I know who've been so successful that now they just have this germ of an idea, and there are people who are willing to put money on them right away without any of the preconditions which I said. The other category
Right. So the
where I've
journey can be different for first time founders versus,
correct,
seasoned founders. Yeah.
correct. So that's one big difference. The second is the size of the idea. So if somebody hits on something completely brilliant and he's got the academics, or he's got, or he or she has, may not have a lot of the other prerequisites, but the sheer brilliance of the idea and at least the initial way in which that problem is being articulated. So you're a PhD in some area, you've done deep research into that area, you've got some phenomenal insights, and you've identified an opportunity which is huge, then some of these rules don't apply. But for, I would say, 90% of the startups I've seen, these rules do apply.
Right. So there's also a level of, self-awareness that you want to see a founder bring forward and kind of understanding, what is the expertise that you're running with, and then also, what some of the expertise is of your teammates and what you're hoping to bring along the way or bring into the venture along the way. So to talk a little bit about action, like, the nickels and dimes and all that, how much do you think is reasonable for someone to be shopping for when they're looking for that seed round?
So I'll again come back to the Canadian landscape, which I'm much more familiar with than in the US landscape. In the Canadian landscape, I would say for seed funding, what I've seen as being typically raised by ventures goes all the way, I would say, from a few $100,000 to probably probably four $500,000 to $1.5 million are typical seed fundraisers. And the expectation is that the people who are writing checks are writing typically for 50K upwards is what people like to see. But sometimes, depending on how interested the venture is on raising money and getting into a dialogue, they may even accept checks for a smaller amount.
I see. Okay, yeah. So it's kind of like what you need, like think about it from a realistic perspective of, what you're going to need to get to that next stage.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about the kinds of sources of this seed funding that exist in the market? For the safe versus price rounds versus, conversion notes. And then also, if during your answer you can mention some of the ones that are maybe more popular than others, but what have you seen?
Sure. So let's again talk about the Canadian landscape for seed funding. So I'll answer this in two fashions. One is what are the kind of instruments, and the second, if you would like to cover off right now, is who are the kind of people or the organizations who do it. So we can briefly touch on both. So when it comes to the nature of the instrument which people ventures raise and typically VCs fund, you name the three categories which are the most common, which is SAFE, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, which is a very standard, I think it stands for something against future equity, standard agreement for future equity. It was created by the Y Combinator guys many years ago. It's literally a very simplistic 3-page document which only needs two or three key decision points for a founder in terms of what is the cap and how much money is coming in from the person. So it's a very simple way of doing business. All you're telling the person is that invest $100,000, and at a future point of time, basically that if my company is worth, let's say, $1 million, then you own 10% of the company. So that's the kind of logic which a safe does. It's very simple for a person to understand and execute, very minimal legal costs, and which can be done there. The next is convertible notes, which I've seen again in the Canadian context. I haven't seen too many VCs really fussed on going convertible notes, because in a convertible note, the thing is that it will eventually convert at a particular point of time to equity once again. So it could be an 18-month period, it could be 24 months. And what it does is it says that I'm giving you a debt, but at that point, when you get more equity or in X number of months, it will get converted into equity at that point of time. So the advantage from an investor point of view is that he'll have a rate of interest which you could be paying, which could be 4, 5, 6%, which he's earning, and it's a debt. So that to that extent is a different kind of instrument. But a lot of VCs are pretty transparent. The only ones I've seen in the Canadian environment are some of these government funded ones who say that, oh, we need to show it on our balance sheet, and we can't show, if we put money in a safe, we can't show it on our balance sheet. Whereas if it's a convertible note, then it's a debt, so I can show it on my balance sheet for government reporting kind of purposes. But otherwise, most of the VCs I know are pretty flexible as far as that item is concerned. What else do we see there? I would say those are the two. Yeah, that's pretty much what we see happening here. Now, talking of the sorry, there's a last category which I missed, which is a price round, which is extremely
Hmm.
uncommon. So a price round
Okay.
is where you're actually saying that I'm offering 10,000 shares at 10 cents a share, and that is more the norm. As you start getting closer to a Series A, you don't see it so much happening as a seed stage, because it's complex for a company because of the stage at which it is in and the high level of uncertainty for an entrepreneur to be able to put a dollar and cent value. And similarly,
Hmm.
it's difficult for a venture capitalist to spend a lot of time and research on figuring out what that price round should be, in light of the fact that there are so many uncertainties which are there in the time ahead.
Fair
So
enough. And what do you think from the entrepreneur perspective? Uh, I guess between the convertible notes and the safe approach, what would be more profitable? Not profitable, preferable. Or do you have any recommendations for kind of who should be going for what, or what kind of what the benefits are, or even pros and cons?
yeah, from an entrepreneur point of view, I'd clearly recommend going safe, because it's very simple. And as long as you look out for a couple of key things, which we'll talk about later, you are very safe. You don't need to spend a ton of money in legal fees. And it's a very fair deal in the sense that all you're doing is you're getting a person to put in, you're selling a part of he's investing and getting a part of the company. So it's not a very complicated math thing. Your balance, your cap table remains relatively clean, as long as you don't get too many, you don't raise money too often as safes. So clearly, I would recommend safes for most entrepreneurs, at least for the seed stage.
Wonderful. Okay, so what is an angel or a VC looking for when they invest? What should someone definitely have included in their pitch deck going in for a seed?
Okay, sorry, maybe I should just touch on one thing, Laura, which I didn't
Oh,
talk about.
sure.
So, in terms of the instrument types, I talked about it. And the other thing which I should talk about is the different people who invest in
Mm,
this. So, when you're reaching out, who are the types of people who typically invest in seed companies. So angels is something which you're also in the Canadian context. An angel normally is what's called an accredited investor, which means that he's got more than some income, or he's got more than savings of some kind, which is the government rules around it. So that's what an accredited investor is. And there are angels who meet that condition and they're willing to invest. Angels either work by themselves or they can be a part of a syndicate. So, for example, for those of you in the GTA, there are at least three angel groups. There's a York Angel Group, which has got about 100 members. There is one for which covers the Golden Horseshoe. So there are multiple angel bodies right across the country, and they're all a part of a broader organization called NACO. So there's plenty of information available on the angel groups, but they are a common hunting ground. So multiple angels are parts of that. So you can approach angels directly. You can approach the angel groups, and they have a filtration process by which they present it to the angels in their network, who in turn may invest. The third category of people who you may be interested in is what I would call super angels or micro VCs. So there's a bunch of not all VC firms. So if you go to A3 or you go to any of these big companies, the minimum check size they write is like maybe tens of millions or hundreds of millions. So because of they would really want to focus in on the kinds of companies they invest in. But you have venture capital firms in Canada who'll write a check for a $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 also. So they'll go down so they are what I would call more like a super angel. So those guys also typically invest in seed rounds. So that's kind of the last item in the possible funders for seed rounds are the family offices. That's a bit of a hit and miss because there are wealthy people who have set up family offices who then either have a mandate in terms of sector or at times not. So some of those guys also invest, but there is no list around it, and it's more the network which you have to leverage to be able to find these family offices.
I
Sorry. So
see.
yeah.
No, and that's great. And so, I guess there's a lot of different ways you can approach that. But what do you think these different audiences, so to speak, would want to see in that pitch deck when someone approaches them about raising seed funding?
I think there are three key things which most of the investors look for, and I'm talking more at seed stage than at a later stage, because there's a big difference on the way people look at companies at this stage versus later on. So the first thing is why you, which means why should I invest in you? And that
Hmm.
is to talk about you as a founding team. So what skills do you bring? Have you created companies in the past? What expertise do you have? What credentials do you have in terms of, have you published papers? Have you got recognition? Have
Right.
you been an advisor to a company? What have, basically, how solid is the founding team? Because they are betting a significant amount of their level of comfort is on the credibility you can establish. And obviously, if you get takes that you've already bought and sold three companies and so on and so forth, and that you are, this is a, you've got you are a great business guy and you've teamed up with a person who's phenomenal in code and he's been a CTO of two companies before that. So then you have got all the right takes right away, which is not reality, obviously, for a lot of the entrepreneurs. A lot of them could be first time entrepreneurs, but they should just be aware that the founding team and the core team composition makes a huge difference on the way any of these people look at it, because that's what they're really banking on to do whatever it takes to be able to get the venture going. So
So it
that's
kind of goes back to the theme. It goes back to the theme of, that self-awareness, both individually and as a team, going into making these introductions and almost first impressions, right? Because this is the launch pad for where you go forward. Yeah. And Dan in the chat says it's all about the people, people. So, be very aware of what the people on your team are bringing and what the people are looking for.
Yeah, and I'll just
So,
add,
yeah.
I'll just add a quirky thing, which is that there are times you see a really impressive bunch of founders and they come and give you all kinds of stuff, and then you ask them that what your LinkedIn profile says that you're also in three other businesses. So how much of your time are you spending on this particular business? And they say, or maybe they're working in a big company and their LinkedIn still reflects that they're working in a company. They say, yeah, I work a full day job and then I put in the extra hours to get this business going, and I'm waiting to get seed funding before I quit my job. And that's the time when you start seeing venture capitalists or anybody who's savvy saying, this is not great. You're not convinced enough about your own idea to put yourself, fully into this particular business. Then if you're not fully convinced about it, then
Mm-hmm.
don't expect me to be fully convinced about it. So again, you'll have exceptional situations where people will say that's fine because of whatever reasons, I will still support it. But that to me is a part of the, why you question that, are you fully committed to this business, and are you, have you sunk in yourself in terms of money, time, energy, so on and so forth. So that was the first one. The second one is, why this idea. So that is all about, what is the problem which you're trying to disrupt. We don't want to hear about your technology first. First thing is you want to hear about is, what is the industry, what is the problem you're trying to fix, how big is that problem, how are you trying to approach solving this problem vis-a-vis what others are, and obviously, how do you think you'll kind of get to that stage. So that is the second part of the puzzle, that if the problem you're solving for is a problem on a global level of like $1 billion, and you may save people 100 million by going with your solution, a lot of people will say, okay, interesting, but remember that when a venture capitalist especially is investing in a venture, he's looking for at least a 10x revenue growth, or that if he puts in $100, he gets $1,000 in 5 to 6 years. So
Mm-hmm.
their expectations are, they're not trying to fund a lifestyle business. So you could be
Mm-hmm.
making, as an individual, you may say that if I earn $200,000 a year, and I'm happy. So a venture capitalist will say, good luck to you, that's absolutely fantastic. It's not the kind of venture I'm going to invest in, because I'm looking for a venture which can multiply my money. As I said, the target for most venture capitalists is a 10x growth in 5 to 7 years. So the market has got to be big enough for that. And at least on the initial sweep, it should seem that whatever you're doing can really make a big difference. And if these can't be simplistically quantified, all you can say, oh, it'll be nice for people and so on, you're short off the block, because they're not seeing that quantum of return coming by. The third
Yeah.
area.
So. Oh, sorry. You
Sorry,
go
no,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead, Laura. You had.
I was just going to say, make sure your digital footprint, I guess, lines up with the best foot you're putting forward in your pitch deck. What can people find out about you by looking at your LinkedIn profile, and make sure that that aligns with whatever it is that you're putting forward when you're having this presentation. But then also, yeah, be able to quantify the market that you're going for, and any kind of research on predicting what that growth will look like is definitely going to help you.
Yep. Uh, the third part is, I would say, the third part is more in terms of whatever traction and the moat which you have built up right now. So how have you validated whatever you're saying? So as I said, one of the critical things which they're looking for is that if it's a software product, have you created a basic product and shown it to people? If it's one of those products which will actually take 6 months of writing code before you can do it,
Mm-hmm.
then have you created the high level functionality, and have you run that past some sample customers? Do you know that who's going to buy your product? So you actually know that you've talked to 20 small business, other software companies, and they can use it as a raw material, or is it something which is going to be enterprise customer thing? Because the enterprise customer is a much longer sales cycle. So there again, have you talked to
Yeah.
some people with what's called a wireframe, which could be a simple version of the code, or have you actually just created a PowerPoint? In fact, I've seen I'm currently working with a very, very smart founder who's raised a couple of $1 million on seed. And the way the model is working is that she does not have a very sound tech backend which is created yet. She has a basic tech backend, but she's created a very impressive value proposition which can be run with people running around in the background, because the business model is so unique in terms of the fintech space. So she's created a unique opportunity of a certain kind in the real estate market, and she's able to, without building a very solid platform, and she's upfront about it, I'm going to be working on this, but she's got customers, she's got funders, she's got a whole business operation which is running without having space age AI sitting in the background. Some very, very simple software for this stage
Mm-hmm.
of the business. But the reason she's got the funding is because of being able to demonstrate traction, that whatever the idea you have, there are takers for it, and that as long as you can show that you have the wherewithal to create that infrastructure and so on and so forth, people will get that level of conviction. So I would say if you these are the three big things which a lot of the venture capitalists are looking for, um, as you go through. And maybe, as we continue the conversation, I'm sure I'll have other random thoughts which come through where people have,
Absolutely.
which has helped in taking them over the closing line or has got them sunk.
Absolutely. And I'm shuffling a little bit because there is a little tiny lizard that is about 5 feet from my head right now, and I just really hope it doesn't jump on me. Um, but to continue, I think on the topic of how to prepare for that round, I'm going to blend a couple of our next questions just in the interest of time. And so talking a little bit more about how someone prepares for a round, in terms of data rooms, due diligence, term sheets, and negotiations. Where is it important to be flexible as an entrepreneur, and then also where is it important to remain firm in terms of what it is that you're looking for?
Okay, so as you start preparing for the round, the one thing which I'll just add on is you need
Hmm.
to do your research with the
Yeah.
venture capitalist or the angel. So you need to know which kind of companies they invest in, what kind of checks they write, and try to get a warm introduction. So that's almost step number one to this whole process. So it's like just the way you solicit customers, you have them on a CRM, or you have a really good Excel spreadsheet which says, this is the information publicly available. He's invested in companies in my broad area, but not exactly in what I'm doing. Then you have a much higher chance of success. So you have to do that work and do it with as much diligence as you would do for customer acquisition. So that's one thing which you should certainly keep in mind. Now, as you start getting into, and obviously tracking whatever conversations you have and follow up. So it's a very focused bunch of activities which you need to be doing. In terms of the minute you get initial traction with the angel or with the VC firm, they may start after having heard your pitch deck and having a follow up meeting or two. They may start then talking to you about opening out the data room. So the data room is something which ideally you should start building way in advance of your fundraising. And there are simple, trivial things which you already have, which could be sitting on different people's laptops, which you need to be having in either a Dropbox, or there's lots of software where you can ensure. So whether it's company documentation, you have it in one spot. Every employee you have hired, their terms and conditions and the NDAs which they have should be sitting in one folder. So there are checklists which you can go through, but start thinking about those before you've actually gotten to a serious discussion, because they're easy to do and they can be taken care of. And I've actually
Hmm.
seen people scampering around because they haven't got an NDA signed by one employee. And suddenly, in the due diligence, the VC has said, "Hey, all your employees don't have NDAs, and or you have a contractor with whom you don't have an NDA, and they may be able to sell your IP to a third party, and that becomes a deal breaker." So just be very cognizant of the fact that this work can be done, beforehand, and to the extent you can prepare, do that work. So as you get into the negotiations per se with the venture capitalist, there are two three key things which you talk about. So there is, how much is he going to write a check for, and the second thing is, what is the valuation. So if you are in a safe mode, those are the key things which they want to be talking to you about. So there are lots of term sheets available, but the key thing to remember is that once you've identified the VC, do you have a good rap going with him, and do you think he's going to be a guy you're going to enjoy working with over the years? Because your first one or two investors are probably going to be, I would say, almost like a marriage, where you're committed to these guys for at least a couple of years, and you've
Hmm.
got to be sure that you're comfortable with them, that they can help you in the journey. Because whether it's referring you to other VCs to raise money at this stage, or help you in the next stage, or in the god forbid situation that there's a major industry shakeup and you are having a problem, they can advise you, they can mentor you. So you've got to be thoughtful about the people, and as you're getting into these discussions, that they're the kinds of people you're very comfortable working with over time. The other thing is that you got to remember is that this term sheet of your funding is going to be the foundation of your future rounds. So if you do anything silly in this term sheet, so for example, if you give them some participative rights on certain liquidation preferences, so you should be sticking to pretty standard terms and conditions on things like term sheets. Because if you give them excessive power in terms of board seats or some of these other financial terms, at this stage it may seem that, oh, it doesn't mean much, so what, he's writing a check of 500,000, I should give it to him. It's got a cascading effect. And remember that if you're in a tech business, it's very unlikely that your route to profitability is going to be possible with your seed funding. So you probably, after your seed funding, you probably need more funding to get to the next stage, so on and so forth. So the minute you put certain kinds of clauses in which are giving disproportionate power to the venture capitalist, you then are setting the stage for yourself getting jammed with over time, which will mean basically that you're going to be losing much more control. And if something was to happen to your company financially, you lose out. So basically, my message to you guys is that when you get into that stage of discussion, term sheets talk about how much control you're giving the person who's investor and how much economic terms are, and both of these need some degree of focus. And be sure that you're doing it in the right fashion so that you are well protected for the future, and that you're not getting too desperate right now for the money and compromising on things which will really slow you down on your growth later on.
Awesome. So that actually kind of leads me to want to skip forward a little bit to one of the later questions, which is, what are some things for founders to think about when they're looking for that strategic guidance? Maybe it's, from someone who is a potential funder, like a VC, or perhaps government funding. But, where should folks think about getting advice from, and how can they be sure that the advice they're going to receive is solid, and how long term should they be thinking, I guess, when they're looking into this round specifically in the beginning?
See, one thing which I always recommend to early stage founders is surround yourself with smart people. So that smart people could be in your team, it could be advisors you sign up, and you could find advisors who are willing to come in on pure equity terms into your company, so that they may bring different areas of expertise. And if they are from if they've been startup founders in any shape or fashion, they are certainly one bunch of people you can rely on. The second area is that I would strongly recommend you should have a good, strong law firm with you. So law firms again will ensure that you don't do anything really silly. But virtually all the bigger law firms have realized that the startup ecosystem is critically important. So they offer package services, whether you name the law firm, and they will have a startup advisory section who'll charge you pretty normal kind of pricing, not what they charge big corporates. So having them on your side is certainly handy. The third area where you can rely is that if you are a part of an incubator, some of them do have advisors there who pro bono on a one-off basis can help you. So that's the kind of thing. But that is a general framework. I've seen some startups working with people with dedicated advisors for the longer haul, because they are so strongly tech focused that they don't follow a lot of the disciplines which seem relatively simple. So I've been with companies with for as much as 5 months, 6 months at times as a one-on-one advisor there, basically saying, hey, do you have you talk to these 10 guys. If you've got no response, have you followed up? Have you increased the list to another 5 people in this space? Have you reached out to these kind of people? So they need somebody to work with them and push them. So it depends. So there are others for whom all of this stuff is native. They do it on their own. So you got to strike your balance, and then either rely on a person who's willing to work with you, or rely on these broader general category of advisory support which you could get. And obviously there's a ton of material online, but I'm assuming a person has already looked at it and is not able to figure out which of those and how to implement them. That's where a one-on-one conversation makes a difference, because there's a ton of stuff online on everything which we talked about.
And I know that we have a lawyer in the audience who would probably really be appreciative of the advice that you gave about having a law firm who can help kind of review some of these terms and the advice that you're getting along the way. But I want to direct to a question from the chat from Dan Borick. So he's asking what your thoughts are on board observer seats from a seed round versus no seats.
So it depends on and I mean, observer. The first thing is that you should like the VC firm, and they should be coming in with their lead, or they are one of the major contributors to the round. That's the situation in which it may be something which is, and you should also see some strategic value of this VC firm. So if you don't see any, if it's just a person who's writing a check who's got no idea this industry, he's just a moneyed guy who's sitting in there. I would say push back. But if you see there's value and as an observer at the end of the day, I would go for it. But
Awesome.
there should be a method to the madness, as I said, that if he's writing $100,000 check and you're raising a 1 million round, then are you going to start yielding for every other person who comes by writing $100,000 check that I'll get you an observer? And that's where I said that remember that this is the foundation for everything which happens later. So you should be able to justify why you're doing it and why you're not doing it for a subsequent investor, either in this round or later round. So if the guy's industry expertise, he's writing a big check, sure, invite him as an observer.
Awesome. So this is the last question that I'm going to ask, and then I'll welcome if there's any questions from the audience. Please put them into the chat, and I'll bring them up with Vivek as we close out the discussion here. But my last question for you, Vivek, is what's the most common mistake that you see founders make during the seed funding process, and I guess how can that be avoided, and from your perspective?
Okay, the one which I see. Let me say things which they should definitely not do, and I've seen some of these things being happening. So dishonesty is one which should clearly not be happening. And I remember one thing, that as a company at this stage, you don't know everything about everything. That's the reality. So you got to be pretty clear on what you clearly know and how you are going about testing your way into the future world. And if there's something you genuinely don't know about, don't bullshit, because everybody reads the newspaper kind of stuff. Everybody has a general industry overview. So people who try to I would say gloss over things, that does not go down well at all. So be upfront that yep, that's an interesting area. Having said that, the market segment I'm going to be chasing is a little different. So but I will certainly keep that in mind, or I will be checking it out. Or it's based on what I'm doing, it's great feedback, but I'm not going down that way for exactly the reasons you said. So be don't try to appear as a know-all. The second thing is,
Mm-hmm.
don't try to be over fast on producing very elaborate financials over many many years and try to hammer home on the point that you have a 10-year financial plan, and here's how this is going to happen in year 3, this is going to happen in year 5. Remember, at this stage, and that's where the stage becomes very critical, is that he's not so much into discounted cash flows and all of it, because he doesn't even know if the business is going to be around 24 months from now or not. So you got to talk about what you need to have conviction about is the power of your idea. How is it superior? What kind of a moat you are building? What are the margins which you will have? The actual mechanics of year by year, and you'll invest more in sales and marketing in year 3 and less in year 5. Those things honestly don't matter, and your valuation for this company is anywhere from 2 million to maybe 10 million. So at this stage, trying to go through the rigor, and to me the rigor is a distraction. Getting into that level of detail is a distraction for you, and if you have spent a lot of time and energy on it, then it reflects in your conversation with the person that no, you don't get it, look at my 10-year returns. And that's when you start turning people off. So stay focused on the big ticket items, which we have kind of covered off as you're
Mm-hmm.
going through this process. Let me see anything
And
else.
I'm sure there are a lot of entrepreneurs who started companies at the end of 2019, early 2020, who could probably speak to having wasted a few hours on long-term planning, considering that you can never really predict what's going to happen in the world and in the marketplace. So I really really appreciate you answering all of my questions. I'm going to open it up, in the chat. If you are interested in asking Vivek any questions, please type them down now. We'll give it a couple of minutes, and if there's no further questions, we can turn on one-on-one networking, and you can chit chat with other folks who are here in the event today. But yeah, if there are any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. All of a sudden, we're interested in getting a round of applause going here. Thank you so much for your time today, Vivek. I think this was a really valuable discussion, and I appreciate you having some really thorough answers to the questions that we asked.
My pleasure. Always here to help the community. Thanks, Laura.